Right. I'm here with FIDE Master Gregory Achulanu. Hey, Greg, how you doing?
Hello.
Thanks for coming for our second part of the interview. So today, I just wanted to talk with you a little more about the history of the DC chess scene and your place in it and people you know. So yeah, can you tell me a little bit about kind of when you came to DC and how you got involved in the DC chess scene?
Well, coming to the DC chess scene was sort of a coming home of sorts because I was born in DC, but then um, from that time till the time I came back, uh, you know, the last place I was before I came back to DC was the South Bronx, and I played in New York until 1977. And then I came back down to the area, and I actually lived in Adelphi, Maryland.
Hmm.
But from there, I started to play at, I played a little bit at DuPont Circle, and then I started to meet some of the people in the area at tournaments. I met Ralph, I met Alan Clifford. Um, there were some other players that I'm not sure if they still play much. I met the Brooms brothers. One of them is not here anymore, Colin Brooms, but Paul Brooms play for the Black Knights a lot. Um, met player named Benny Shell. Um, you know, there's some other players that were like lower rated players that I met. Met a player named Gregory Kierce, who became a strong expert, and he did some writing also. As far as masters, I met Ken Clayton, and I spent some of the time playing with Clayton because of the Your Move Chess Club, and that was located on in Regency Row, right across from the Key Bridge. I think it's a bicycle shop now.
Right, I know what you're talking about. Right when you
Right.
cross from Virginia into DC, you see it right there.
Yes, but that was sort of the next um, generation of the Metro Club, and pretty much Vince Moore was, I think, the person that ran most of the tournaments there. Vince is a master, and he lives in Florida.
Hmm.
And at the time, Vince was an expert, and I was, a B player.
Hmm.
And at your
Late 70s.
yes,
Okay.
um, so 77, I was 1644, and I started playing a lot at your move. I also played a little bit at DuPont Circle, but DuPont Circle wasn't a place that I spent a lot of time. I just dabbled with DuPont Circle a little bit, but I was
And
aware. Go ahead.
oh, I was just gonna ask quickly about that being kind of a fixture of the DC chess scene. If we could talk a little bit about DuPont Circle when that kind of became big. But yeah,
Mhm.
sorry, go ahead.
Sure. And so DuPont Circle was a place that I got to play. Pause your video for a second. I have to get some water.
Okay, sure. Okay. So you said about DuPont Circle. What's kind of the history there?
Well, that was a place where, in its heyday, it was always full of players. People were playing, sort of in the vein of other parks around the East Coast. There were a lot of interesting characters that were there, and some of the players, strong players, came there to just play for fun. Some of them played for more than fun, and there were some interesting battles that happened there. Some strong players would come into town and wind up at DuPont Circle. There were some interesting matches. Tate would play uh, Morrison or whoever came from out of town. Sometimes he'd wind up there. Some other IMs, GMs would come through DuPont Circle. And there were also people that were there all the time. And they were part of the sort of the fixture of the DuPont Circle scene. I think the quality and the atmosphere changed over the years, not in a positive way, but it did change. And
So, hmm. So would you say that's been kind of the lifeblood of the DC chess scene, or is it kind of in terms of institutions in DC? I mean, there are quite a few. So would you say that's kind of like, well, that's like there's the park chess scene, and then there's the clubs. So how would you kind of describe the nature of these institutions and the kind of infrastructure of the DC chess scene?
well,
How it's developed?
the DuPont Circle was just a place where people played and fooled around. There were a lot more tournaments that happened. There were tournaments that happened at Catholic University, at American University, um, at George Washington University. So there were a lot of tournaments that happened in the area,
Hmm.
rated tournaments. And then later there became some larger tournaments that came into the area. We also had some people that came through and lived here. So Tate was one very strong player. Another one was Roman Djindashvili. He lived here as well for a while because his brother worked at the Voice of America, and he was in the area. But of course, he was always bopping back and forth to various places playing in larger tournaments. Also, Kovalik was in the area, but he didn't really play. He never played in the U.S. He had a contract with the Bundesliga in Germany.
Hmm.
So most of his play was there. The only time he played in the U.S. was the U.S. Championship.
So
But
among
he,
the strongest players or most interesting would be Emery. Oh, and go ahead. Sorry, and Emery Tate. I'm international master Emery Tate. I'm really interested to hear what you have to say about him because I know that you knew him. But
yes,
go ahead.
well, to talk about Emery, my dealing with him, the first time I met Emery was in 1977. He came into Your Move. And even at that point, he was using the term X-Clam. Um,
Uh-huh.
but at the time, I think we were like 1800s and he was like a 1700. And, I just realized his style was very, very tactical. Um, and, at the time, I was actually a better player than he was. But he showed me a game from memory that he had beaten Mark Ginsburg. And Mark Ginsburg at the time, I think he had become a master. And that was quite a bit further ahead than I was. And he showed me the game from memory. He didn't have a score sheet. He just started showing me the moves, and I thought, well, he's sort of bragging here, but I came to find out that he had a very strong memory. Um, and what I found out about him at that point was he didn't just have chess skills, he had physical skills too. Because we were in Georgetown on M Street and he was trying to catch a bus, and the bus was, I think it was 2 or 3 blocks down the road.
Okay.
And I haven't seen too many people run that fast, but he actually caught the bus and he was like flying. I mean, he was really running very fast. Um, I'll say this other thing about him. Later on, when we were both, much higher rated, we were in the Skittles room, and I think it was in New York, and he was arm wrestling somebody that was about 75, 100 pounds heavier than he was,
Hmm.
and he put the person down. He was very, very strong physically.
Right.
And
Right. Well, he was a veteran. Well, he won the U.S. Armed Forces Championship, and also I didn't realize this. You told me about the NATO Championship as well, but he won these tournaments multiple times, right?
yeah, well, he won the Armed Forces tournament 5 times, and I think he won the Indiana State Championship 11 times.
Wow.
But the thing was that I think from one of the podcasts that I was watching, and Andrew was saying that he was probably in the service branch that he was in. He was the person that learned Russian the fastest of anybody in history.
Oh
Uh,
wow.
he was
Really,
he was
really
very fluent in Russian, and it was
which was
interesting
a
because
big asset back then.
it was very interesting because there were several times that there were Russian players that would try to say things, and he would immediately have conversations with them, and that sort of changed the temperature in the room.
Right, they were like talking behind his back or something, or you know, talking
So they,
smack or something. He's like, I know exactly what you're saying.
oh no, he didn't do that. He just went Russian. He immediately started speaking in Russian and looked at him in the face, and then
Right,
he
no
he would uh,
surprise.
he would change the thing. He was a very loyal person as well. I mean, this is probably one of the aspects, of his qualities. People think of him as very arrogant and very excellent, but as far as a human being, you really wouldn't want a better friend than Emery
Hmm.
because he always had your back. And if you were in a situation where you needed a backup, you could always rely on him, which is qualities that I haven't always possessed. But
No, that's you know,
impressive, he
it's,
always had,
it's
yeah,
that's great to go to have a better sense of him than just I mean the amazing picture that we have of him, the triple like Diane Shabazz's Dr. Shabazz's triple exclam, which I actually just got because you were speaking a couple weeks ago. You told me about it.
you'll love it. You'll love the
Yeah,
book.
and
Uh,
he delves it, and he really delves into Emery's character as well. It's real nice to see again beyond the surface of the bravado, which itself is exciting, is fun, but to see what kind of person he was, that's great to hear about.
oh, there was another aspect that there was like in the Skittles room, that was a whole nother world.
Uh-huh.
That kept me from doing well in many World Opens because I wound up being there instead of being asleep. So,
Mhm.
but there's one time in particular there was a Russian FIDE master that was coming into the Skittles room and trying to hustle lower rated players
Mhm.
and really trying to make them feel bad. And Emery was there, and you know the guy said, "I'll play anybody 5-1." And Emery spoke up and says, "I'll play you 5-1."
The other way around.
And he says, "Don't come here there with this mess. Get the blank out of here with that." And the guy just left, because Emery says, "Don't come in here with that. Just don't
And
try
did
to."
he know? I assume he knew about how strong Emery was.
Well, the guy just immediately left the room.
Mhm. Intimidated him.
Yeah.
I like flipping the script like that. And it didn't matter. Well, I was reading in Dr. Shabazz's book about, he would sit down on the board, didn't matter who you were, said that game he was stronger than you. Remember that, something like that. That game he believed he was stronger than you. You might be a 2800, 2700, whatever, but he was undaunted. So I'm gonna get you because any game anyone could win. He's such a ferocious attacker.
Well,
He could be intimidated by anyone.
there's a very nice interview that I think it's a podcast that he did when he became an IM. And you can
Mhm.
probably find that with Shabazz was interviewing Emery and was talking about when he made his final IM norm at that World Open. He beat
Oh yeah, yeah.
Fristenets.
I read. No, I read. I actually just read that as well. I read
Yeah,
that interview. Yeah,
yeah.
it just they were kind of focusing on his games, his recent gagames.
Well,
He said he
Fristen,
was talking about how he was unhappy with one day. He had one rough day, and he ended up with 6 out of 9. He got his IM norm right, but he was thinking maybe 6.5. He could have gotten a GM norm.
right? Yeah, he was always anytime he got a norm. He got an IM norm. He says, "I wanted the GM norm." he he didn't really care for the IM title. He said he really wanted the GM norm, and he never got it. And it's mentioned in the book. It's really
Hmm.
sad that that wasn't possible. I mean, of all the things, um, I think that's one of the major injustices that I've experienced is that he didn't become a GM because he
Well,
was
it's kind
he
of
was
like almost
definitely.
maybe honorary GM. It's kind of like honorary GM because we know he's so good. It's kind of like before you had the GM title. Didn't people kind of get like sort of after the fact get their GM titles or something? I've heard about that. Like you know, because they didn't have a chance to get it earlier when the GM title wasn't around. I don't know the exact history, but I've heard something about that. But
That's quite possible.
he definitely deserved the title. Yeah, so we can view him as a grandmaster. Um, and yeah, just and he mentioned in the book as well how I think Daim was Dr. Shabazz was talking about just how he really wanted to leave a legacy. He was aware of that. Yeah, and
Yes.
as a brilliant attacking player. So it's kind of like art of attack in chess comes to life, demonstration of that, right? Similar to like looking at tall games. I think of tall games and I think of Tate games, and to be inspired. And I'll show people some of the Tate games, like against you Dawson and things like that.
Well, the thing about Tal and Emery is that there were some people that knew both, like Wojo.
Okay.
Wojo definitely had experience with both players. Gingy had experience with both players. So there are certain players. Shabalov had experience with both players, and Tate beat Shabalov in one of the games in the book.
Oh, right. That was another big GM scalp. And I worked with GM Akobian as my coach growing up, and he does include the win against him in the USG. And Akobian came very close to winning those championships. He beat Shabalov as well. But then Tate
Right.
shows a brilliant game where he beats Akobian in one of the
And
three annotated games that he does in Shabazz's book.
yeah, I think I have that on my website, and one. I haven't seen my website in a while, but I have the video of that particular. It's a lesson from Emery Tate, and that's that particular game.
That's
And
fascinating.
the thing about Emery that everybody talks about, that nobody else is ever going to do, is like those sessions that he had at the World Open after he won a game, and everybody is like, watching his commentary with the exclams and the whole bit. Um, he just had a way of, bringing it all to life. And, when people try to like poke a hole in its variation, he would have a very nice way of doing a nice counter attack, which put the person on point for a moment. Everybody would have a good laugh, and then he'd move on to analyze the game. He wouldn't make them the target. He would just, refute the refutation, and then make it clear that the refutation was refuted, and then he would move on.
Well, I mean, we're all trying to get at the truth of the game. It's a debate. I mean, people say, "Oh, I don't like these books with all these parentheses." I say, "Well, I mean, look, we're trying to get at the truth of the game," and he was getting there.
Yeah.
So,
Well, again, it's now the one thing that I wanted to mention, that I was thinking about before we got together,
mhm,
was the fact that everybody has to determine what kind of price they want to pay to get to the level they want to get to.
mhm.
If you want to be a master, you have to pay a certain price. If you want to be an IM, you have to pay a certain price. If you want to be a GM, you have to have talent, and then you have to pay the price.
A
It's
big
it's
price.
not,
Yeah. You
but
got to
but the,
spend your life. You got to devote.
but
Yeah,
but
opportunity cost.
but there must be the talent factor. And
Right.
I'm very clear with the parents when I talk to them, when I teach. It's like I want them to understand the following. It's like, okay, I'm a coach, and I will do the best I can with the student, but please don't make any unrealistic expectations of your child, because it's not fair to the child.
Hmm.
It really isn't,
Yeah.
because you can't make someone a world champion if they're just a class E player for life.
Well, but that reminds me as a counterpoint, I guess, like Tate reminds me of a quote about, I think, who said that about Karpov, right? About how he didn't have talent or something. Who said that?
Oh, well, Von Vinnick said that.
Von Vinnick. Yeah, I thought so. That's what I was thinking. Yeah. So,
But
yeah,
Von
and
Vinnick
obviously in
also
that case,
also
it wasn't.
coached him. Yeah.
Yeah. So, well, I mean, obviously he was very good. I guess that it was just a question of how far he could go.
He
Um,
did start playing chess when he was 4 years old.
yeah. So you figure, hey, you start at 4 and you're 8 or whatever. Why aren't you better? But yeah, I didn't really get into it until I was closer to high school. But anyway, as for well, and then Maurice Ashley, GM Ashley. Speaking of uh, Tate's loyalty, it seems like in the book, I saw he's got his arm around Ashley. It seemed like he really took a liking to him, and they kind of developed together, right? Well, and then of course, he
To
won
a
the GM
point.
title, but as
To
Ashley did. But
I will say this, to a point. I will say this clearly, to a point.
okay,
There was a point, and I will try to say this as delicately as possible.
hmm
There was a point of divergence. Maurice was focused on the goal. Emery was focused on living life. When it comes to Capablanca versus Alekhine, Capablanca had the talent, Alekhine had the talent for work. Now, he did have talent as well, but as far as assessing positions, no one assessed him like Capablanca did.
Hmm. But then
Now,
there's performance, and well, as Fisher said, working like a dog. Well, obviously Alekhine's brilliant, but the performance factor, Alekhine, yeah, so precise too.
well, I mean, Capablanca didn't lose a game for 10 years.
Yeah, it's just I remember that game. Some feature was it against the C2 square, right? By Alekhine, was
Yes,
it? Yeah, I guess
yes.
that's the precision, and Capablanca's usually the one doing that. But I guess yeah, Alekhine was just so deep in his comedy. But in Capablanca, we talked about another time about like these narratives. Capablanca had such clean narratives, and Alekhine was, I guess, just more of this cold precision, maybe. But I don't know. It's tough to say.
Well,
I mean,
let
he's really
me
just the only guy. He's the only guy
let's
that could beat Capablanca at that, because Capablanca was quite precise too. So.
yes. Well, let's go to that match. In that particular match, Alekhine won the first game. Capablanca was actually ahead in that match
Uh huh.
because he came back and took the lead. And what happened was Alekhine came back and tied the match, and then in a game that was pretty much even, Capablanca lost a rook
Mm.
in a very unusual tactic. And Alekhine did a very, as I mentioned the last time we were together, Alekhine said three things: know thy opponent, know thyself, know thy opponent, and a higher aim than achieving satisfaction.
Uh huh.
Alekhine was very, very detailed in looking at his opponent's games.
Mm-hmm.
Capablanca didn't unless he had to. And as it went later, after he lost to Alekhine, he started doing more work on his game.
Mm-hmm.
And but still, most of what he saw, he didn't do a lot of work. He just saw what he saw at the board.
Right.
Um, and probably to his detriment, he just enjoyed living life. And you know, uh, he won the tournaments that he needed to win. On the way up. On the way up was probably when he was doing his most work.
Mm-hmm.
From
Yeah, he
19,
knew his theory. He knew his players' games and stuff. Like I remember Queen A6 against Nimzovich in that Karo Khan, the
yeah,
heavy
yeah.
artillery game, and just things like that. So he knew those lines, obviously. Well, and there were these lines probably that were played again and again and again, right?
Well, I think
Later.
Capablanca knew some things about the opening. I think Alekhine did the he when he did a tournament book, he analyzed every game.
Mm-hmm.
And not only did he analyze every game from that tournament, in New York 1924, he analyzed every game from the top tournament and every game from the minor tournament.
Yeah, so he had the whole thing. He had the hard work, and he had the support of the Russians and everything.
He did not.
Yeah,
He did.
yeah.
He
Oh,
did
he
not.
didn't.
No.
Oh, okay. 'Cause I was almost thinking, is this analogous to Fischer Spassky in terms of Spassky's
Oh
support?
no
But he
no
didn't
no
have that.
no
He didn't have
no.
that kind of support that Spassky had.
Oh
Interesting.
no. As a matter of fact, Alekhine never went back to Russia after 1914.
No, I mean like earlier on. Oh, really? Okay, okay.
Yeah,
Because
yeah.
he won in 1926 or seven.
He won in 1927, but he won that in Argentina. See, after
Oh, I
1914,
didn't realize that.
he was on his family was on the wrong side of the Russian Revolution.
Okay.
So he was, it's very interesting if you read what the Russians say about Alekhine. There's one book that takes him as one of theirs. That's a Kotov book. Alexander Alekhine is, he's this, continuation of the communist tradition. And then there's other books that they call him a traitor.
Oh, I didn't realize that had happened so early though. I thought that was like some break. I know he was you know, similar to Ferrugia, ended up in France, right?
Right,
If I
but
recall.
I think the
I thought that
last
was
time
later on.
the last time he played in Russia was 1920, and then I think after that he never went back. And he wanted to go back, but he couldn't. And then
Okay.
for the rest of the time, he was a French citizen. And then after 1939, there was a tournament in Buenos Aires, which is an Olympiad. And this is a famous tournament where the players that stayed in Argentina, like Najdorf and and other players, Oliskis and some other players, they stayed in Argentina, and Argentina became very strong. But
Mhm.
they stayed in Argentina. The ones that went back, most of them died. And now Yeke went back, and then there's this whole thing about whether he wrote these anti-Semitic articles,
Right, right.
and which I have a couple of those. Uh, there's a book called The Personality of Chess, which is written by Rothenberg and Horowitz. It's probably very hard for you to find, but there's a couple there. They have that in there. They also have Fisher's interview with Ginsburg in 1960, where he said that he could give Naidas to any woman in the world.
Allen Ginsberg, the poet.
Ralph Ginsburg, not Allen
Oh,
Ginsberg.
okay. I was like, you never know. Um,
Yeah, this is a classic, and Fisher denied he said that, and then of course it's right there in black and white. So
right, right.
that's I have to keep my hero in check.
Yeah, it's ugly history, man. But going back to with that, yeah, you know so much about chess history, so it's why we got the big players on the global scale, and yeah, the macro things. We got going more into the micro with the individuals. Yeah, it's fascinating. So as and going back to Maurice, or the kind of analogy it looks like you're making to Maurice Ashley and Emery Tate. Would you kind of is that kind of analogous in a way in terms of the hard work or the structure that Maurice
I
Ashley had?
I'm going to give Maurice some high praise here, okay? Because from time to time I give Maurice a hard way to go because I don't think anybody could promote Maurice Ashley better than Maurice Ashley.
Mhm. You
But
got to be. Yeah, he's a great promoter. Yeah.
well, he's the greatest. I mean, I've never seen anybody take the opportunity that he has had and make do a better job with it than Maurice. And see, the thing is, if Emery had a fraction of that, he would have been a GM. But Emery just, Emery was a free spirit. Maurice had two family members that were world class. The one world class kickboxer, I forget what his sister did, but she was also world class in whatever she was in. Um, my memory fails me on that. But the thing is, he considered himself the black sheep of the family, and yeah, so he worked very, very, very hard, and he was always very organized, always very polished. The very first time I saw Maurice, he was wearing a suit and tie at a tournament. He's very clean. Um, Maurice, you knew Maurice was going somewhere because he just treated everything in a very professional manner. I didn't know him when he was playing for the Black Bear School and all that stuff. And I didn't know him when he was playing, doing the stuff in New York. But when I saw him, this was at an under 2400 section in the World Open, and I think that he was like second in that section. He also played in a futurity, which is something that was run down here. This is something you'll also find in some King's Files, where there were certain players that played against some invited guests. For instance, Epishin and Driev came down, as well as Walter Morris, who's an IM, Richard DeLon, the late Richard DeLon, who was an IM, and so David Mailer ran those tournaments, and
Hmm.
the thing was that Maurice played in one of those tournaments, and I think he got a norm in one of those tournaments. But Maurice, he took 2 years, and he zoned in, and he had backing, and he made the most of it. And from there on, everything that he's done, he's made the most of his opportunities. And I think he's the only one that could have done what he did. I mean,
Interesting.
he's very inspiring, even though and there were some opportunities that Maurice presented the people that were around him as he came up. Um, and I think there's a picture in Daim's book And this is sort of why I don't like to talk about the African American scene because I'm not in it. Because I was sort of invited and I didn't go. And
Okay.
so I was sort of separated out because of that. And for good reason, because, this was for people that had an opportunity and the iron was hot, they struck, and I didn't.
Yeah, yeah. Dr. Shabazz talks about that in his book, Triple Exclam. Talks about what. So answering this question, why aren't there more, um, basically more GMs from the Black diaspora, right, from the African diaspora? Well, I think he calls what's the phrase that he uses? The drum masters.
Yeah.
Um, yeah, so he has a section on that, and I mean he's referring to you need all these resources, right? So a
Yes.
lot of
Well, let
yeah.
me put it to you this way. Okay. During the time that I went from, and we can touch on this another time, but the time I went from 1600 to 2000, which will be the next thing I'd like to talk about at some point, because there is a point there, and then there was a point where I got over 2200, and then to 2400. Every step demands a different amount of effort,
Hmm.
but it's sustained effort, and it's you can't have anything else going on. The family has to be back burner. I don't think Maurice had any constraints, whether a wife, child, anything like that.
Right.
Emery did, and even with Emery dealt with that in a different way. If you want to see how he dealt with that, I would go watch some Andrew podcasts. He'll explain what it was like to have Emery as a dad.
Andrew Tate. Yeah, I didn't know, but I remember I've seen him on YouTube debating Pierce Morgan and stuff, and I'm like, oh, I don't, I've seen him a couple times. Like, oh, okay, I didn't know about that connection. It's the same Tate.
Well, the reason I found out about that was because I knew he had the kids, and then I saw the picture, and then I Googled Andrew, and then I realized what his net worth was, which is in the hundreds of million, which is in the hundreds of
Oh,
millions.
really?
Yes. So it was like, how did that happen? So then I looked more about it, and then I saw the podcast, and then all of a sudden, I don't know if you've heard of a guy named Patrick Bet David. He's involved with a podcast called Valuetainment. That's this whole deal, and he's into business. But the point of the matter is, um, he did one video called "Your Next 15 Moves," and he uses an analogy with chess. He talks about how a grandmaster sees 15 moves ahead, and he says like this player sees 5 moves ahead, this player sees 10 moves ahead, but a grandmaster sees 15 moves ahead. So he
Hmm.
talks about your next 15 moves. Going back to the situation with Maurice, um, Maurice came down to DC to go to a school, Malcolm X, as a matter of fact, in Southeast. And at the time, Intel was this is way back in the 1990s. Intel was supporting putting some PCs in the schools,
Okay.
and Maurice came down to like do an sort of like a thing with the Intel, and he was, I think, at an IM at the time, and he was just very, very. Every time Maurice is in front of an audience, he's very impressive. In
Hmm.
front of a camera, he's very impressive. I mean, he was just built for those particular things, and
Yeah, that's a powerful combination, and a rare combination as a chess player. And well,
well,
those folks are the ones who are rising in the social media age, I suppose. Um, but yeah, and even earlier on, when you had, I guess, the earlier versions of internet chess, and then now it merges to streaming and everything. But he was on top of that the whole time, right? And then obviously he had the Millionaire Chess Challenge. Was it 2 or 3 times before that folded? Or
as
stopped
far
playing?
as I know, there was only one of those.
I think there was a second one, and then actually he was very nice about it because I think it was two if I recall, and then there
Well,
so he
yeah, the
stole.
second one lost so much money that you couldn't do it again.
Yeah, it was a big. I mean, it was a gamble, but
Right.
I respect. It was big, and I respect him for that. But he was very nice. So we had the board stored in Atlantic City, and I went out there with Robin Ramson of Chess
Yes.
Girls DC, where I volunteer. Yeah, so we made a drive out there, and he's like, just take it. He had all these boxes of this Millionaire Chess Challenge boards, and
I think I got
mugs.
I got one of the books out of that. I think she gave me one.
Yes. Oh yeah, the books. Yep. There were these hardcover, hundreds of, yeah. I mean, thousands of dollars worth of stuff. It was real
It
nice of
was
them
a
to.
very impressive undertaking at that time, and you know, I was, you know, I've always rooted for anything he's done, because you know regardless of anything you might say about Maurice. I mean, Maurice has always really put his heart and soul into trying to move the community forward. Even reading his article in this month's Chess Life, he was talking about the fact that even though he's the first African American grandmaster, he says he doesn't know why. He wants to make sure that he's not the only. And he said that why are there like 10? He was talking about Brewington, Hardaway, and Tani. Of course,
Uh-huh.
Tani's from Nigeria, but Brewington is from the area I used to live in. I don't know Brewington at all, but I've seen him on Chess Kid, and I know he's got a couple of IM norms, and Maurice says he'll probably be a GM by the time he's 16.
Well, how about Tawny? Wait, what is Tawny right now?
Tani's got some IM norms, I think. I think he's
Okay,
at
I'm
FM
sure he'll
at the
be an
moment.
IM very soon, and or maybe he'll just jump, like you said about Emery Tate not caring about the IM. Maybe he'll just jump straight to GM. I wouldn't be surprised. But
That's
yeah, he's a
rare.
huge,
That's
huge,
very rare for
huge,
that to happen.
huge, yeah, a huge talent. Though I pretty much have no doubt that he'd become a GM.
I
Yeah,
suspect this is my feeling, and this is I can't say this is official, but this is what my gut feeling is. I suspect that anybody that gets close to that kind of situation runs into high resistance. I think
mhm.
that Emery ran into a lot of high resistance, probably because of his personality, and probably because you know he just ran into it. Sometimes people make their own bad luck. Sometimes, they don't play well with others.
Mhm.
And, if you don't play well with others, occasionally you run into a situation where some resistance gets developed and you run into it.
Well, I'm thinking. Here's a few assumptions. Speculating a bit. I'm thinking one, Tawny's much younger. Two, and he's already shown himself to be prodigy at that age, which I think is a lot younger than Tate, right? When he really got into it. And then, correct me if I'm wrong on these. Two is that Tawny has the big support network that's developed around him, right? Because a lot of people want to really support what
Oh,
he's doing.
yes.
And three, maybe a little speculation, but perhaps it's easier to become a GM these days. Maybe,
Oh,
based on closed
oh,
tournaments.
oh,
You
there's
get these
a,
closed
uh,
tournaments with
oh,
less sharp GMs that you can beat and stuff. I mean, not to disparage it too much. Well, there's that. I actually, I need to read that New York Times piece, but I understand it without even reading it.
oh,
There's
let me deal with the
easier in
last
some
thing
ways,
you
is it
said.
not?
I totally agree with it. Let me deal with the last thing you said, okay? Without disparaging anybody's grandmaster results or what have you, it's very clear that there is a strong manipulation factor for norms.
Mhm.
So there's certain people, like you said, okay, suppose you have a room full of grandmasters like myself who haven't played much in the past 30 years, but they have a
Mhm.
grandmaster title. And you say, "Oh, okay, we have this young and up and coming player who's played 200 games this year.
Right. Right.
Let's invite this young man and invite them."
Yeah. 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 I mean,
And
and they just have, even if they're just a strong tactician, they
uh,
can beat these seasoned GMs who are not,
that,
not that necessarily that they've deteriorated with age. It's just that they just aren't active, as you said, and that makes a huge difference.
yeah,
Or not,
and
hardly active.
also if you have a situation like they have in Hungary, where you have like a Saturday GM tournament, and there's going to be GMs. When I was coming up, there was two GMs that played in the United States. There was Shankovich and Lane, and they only played in New York, and they only played a couple times. And you were lucky to have a master in your tournament. And there were lots of experts, and that's where it was. Occasionally you get IMs. If you had IMs, that was a big deal. Now, I've seen some of these tournaments. They have 10 GMs in a weekend. Swiss,
Right. Right.
and
Now,
it's like, yeah,
yeah. So based,
it's
I mean, so it's probably based on these factors and how good Tani is. Again, not to disparage that aspect. I mean, he probably get it either way, but I'm just saying that's even more of an argument as to why he would get that title. the GM title. Oh, by the way, I'll make a quick aside. I'm going to propose a reform to you because I think it's also too easy in a sense. Well, there are ways in which you can rig the U.S. national master. Like I've heard about this. I mentioned to some people about these small tournaments that people set up, just kind of self-dealing. And you just you beat up on club level players,
Yeah,
1900,
right.
16, and
One
yeah, you
point at a
become
time.
no, that's maybe to become an expert, to become a master, you can't just beat up on club players and become, if it happens, but no, that's not gonna, if you play in open tournaments and stuff, that's not gonna happen. You're gonna face stronger competitions. There should be some standard, like similar to a FIDE. I don't know, that would be more for norms by FIDE, but some standards, make it harder.
Yeah, well, I played in a lot of games for at a certain period of time. Like I said, like I told you before, I played about 600 rated games.
Uh-huh.
And when somebody plays, I was like I played over 300 over the rating of 2200. So it's like when that happens, okay, then you don't have to worry about whether somebody's a master or not. But somebody's is beating, and I've heard these stories. These stories happened even 20 years ago when somebody was playing like one game against a person to gain a point, a point, a point, a
Yeah.
point, a point, a point, and then they finally get to 2200. That's like no, no, that
That's
shouldn't
not how you
happen.
do it. That, yeah, exactly. You can't.
That
I
that
mean,
no.
I don't even know. I don't know what the rule is on these, like, these kind of these matches that TDs can set up and what but there should certainly be some type of rule in terms of like what kind of match you're allowed to set up for some sort of self-dealing, right?
Right.
Uh,
Yeah. There's a lot of comedies that happen.
yeah,
Fortunately, the players in my time, you knew why they were better players. They either saw something you didn't see, or they understood something you didn't understand. And by dealing with them, it raised your level of calculation and positional sense.
right.
The positional sense thing was the thing that I really got a lot of by watching the analysis of these players, and the GMs that were around, they were, they didn't waste time on bad lines. They would just go to critical positions and like beat the critical positions up. And you learn a lot by just watching that. It was like the old days with the adjourn positions, which are no longer in existence.
Uh-huh. Yeah,
He's
yeah.
spending all night. Even Fisher said in my 60 memorable games, he spent all night looking at a rook upon ending, and he said he learned a whole lot about rook upon endings after spending a whole night analyzing one position.
So
And
I guess
that's
he
that.
didn't do that. You need rest in order to perform well. I guess it didn't matter for him. Maybe he slept in until 1 p.m. after that. I don't know how he got his rest then.
Well, I don't know if you heard about the Nigerian Master that just played at Times Square. They played for 58 hours.
No way.
This, yeah, this is it's in my student sent me that, and this is just recent. He's trying to break the Guinness Book. And if they said he was going to beat everybody that sat down, I think that would be a tall order in New York.
Well, and just to finish with the topic of Emery Tate,
Yes.
so you mentioned positional sense, and there's that, maybe a quip, or I don't know, about where he said that he had only read The Art of Attacking Chess by Vukovic. Now, and you could pick up positional sense just by studying the master games, and you understand weak squares and stuff, and you gain a lot. You know about good bishops. You pick this stuff up anyhow. Even from that book, it's all there in a way. So is that true? And do you think that he lacked that in terms of being a well-rounded player, the positional sense at all?
Uh, the first GM he beat was Paul Benko.
And clearly a good positional. Well, sometimes that the tactics can override positional sense, right?
Right.
Ideally you have the marriage of the two, but sometimes it's just steamrolls it, right?
Well, I would say that it's funny that that gets mentioned because there were some times I tried to like play an even ending against Emery, and a lot of times he'd outplay me in an even ending. It reminds me of the story that happened with Tal. I give this analogy where there was a Yugoslavian journalist that said Tal played the opening like a grandmaster and the middle game like a strong grandmaster, but he played the end game like a master.
Uh,
And so Tal read the article, and so he was playing in the next round. And he said, so as soon as possible, he traded queens.
just to prove it, to disprove him, show how strong he
And
is. Man.
there was another game that Tal sacrificed the queen against Smyslov just to have a bishop versus knight ending. And Smyslov laughed at him. He says, "Oh, so you sack your queen just to get a slightly better ending."
And
And
unfortunately, I think Silman includes in his endgame book 5 masters, right? He includes Smyslov as one of them. Unfortunately, Tal, I don't think got included as one of the 5 masters for their, being a maestro of the endgame.
like I said before, the way that I disprove a lot of this stuff is I just go to look at the results of the games, see how many tournaments that Tal has won after he was world champion. After 1960, see how many tournaments Tal won. And see how many end games he won. He won a lot of pure end games.
Hmm. Results speak for themselves. Yeah.
Yeah, it's another funny thing with tacticians and end games. Strangely enough, Capablanca thought that Marshall was a very strong endgame player. Some people thought he was weak in the end game, and Capablanca said, "Oh no, he's very strong in the end game." And I looked at some of the end games, and against some of the players in some of the matches, Marshall outplayed people in end games. So
Yeah, and he's not known for that. He's known more for his attacking skills, right?
yes, in Capablanca's chess fundamentals, it's like the thing that I find that I look for is little bits that go a long way. Little incremental pieces of the chess puzzle. That's what I'm looking for. When I find them, they usually go a long way and they just stay with me. This
Hmm.
little nuggets, very small
Nuggets of
nuggets.
wisdom. Yep. And the other thing I want to mention about tacticians is, similarly about over tactics over positional knowledge. Again, ideally you have a blend, but a lot of times you have a sense of how to play a good endgame. Or you get some good knight versus bad bishop, and a lot of that's just purely tactics. Because no matter how good you are at your general evaluation, you got to look at those knight maneuvers and so forth and restrain your opponent if you have the bishop and all that, right? So a lot of that is pure tactics once you have the
If
general positional sense.
what I'm sure you've won your share of tournaments. Whenever you win a tournament, what is usually the way that you win it? Anytime I've won a
Normally
tournament, I
placing, I don't like winning, but or maybe small ones. But what is the way I win it? I don't know. I mean, you know, just trying to really outplay my opponent and just being super aggressive and relentless to try to get one-sided games, I guess.
well, there's two reasons why I've won tournaments. One is I learned how to save lost games.
Uh-huh.
And there's actually a period of my chess playing career that I actually deliberately tried to be like Lasker and give myself a bad position to see if I could win them. And
Yeah,
then
personal challenge.
I did that for a while, but then when I started playing good players, I realized, oh, I can't do that. Nowadays, you can't do that even against class players. You give yourself too much
Well,
of a deficit, and these guys can take you out. Even like A players and even some B players can do that.
I'm all for reverse psychology. So pretend like, in a sense, so pretend like you have that bad position, but you actually have a good position. Or sometimes I'll forget, like, wait, I was up a pawn. Just play the best game, just fight on like you're down a pawn, right? Because that's what
Right.
people do so well when they're coming from behind. They're like a rat, you're like a rat, a rattlesnake struggling for survival, right?
Well,
Anyway,
rooting for the underdog. That's I like when the underdog wins.
absolutely. Yeah. And going back one more thing, and then let's get into the DC chess in a bit. And I want to get into your a bit more, and I want to get into what you mentioned about your own continuing discussion of your own chess development. So in terms of Maurice Ashley and developing, well, you mentioned something about where he had some African American chess players meet up in New York. So kind of developing, again, what Daim Shabazz was talking about with the African American or from masters of the African diaspora, basically, and trying to really provide the resources. So you mentioned something about that in New York.
Compare that to what's happening in India. In India, they bring Kramnik and whomever else to India to train the up and coming juniors. They bring the top players. They bring the top trainers, and it's all taken care of. They don't have to worry about paying for it. They take a bunch of Indian players, take them to foreign tournaments. There's at least 2 or 3 of them in every tournament. So it's a constant group effort all the way. And they're never left alone. And it's just the group is constantly going together. That is not the case with the players that I mentioned. And Emery especially. Emery did it all by himself.
Okay. He's
And
kind of
that's
he's an outlier in that sense.
and that's whenever he became an IM, he can't say that anybody showed him how to become an IM. It was Emery Tate showed Emery Tate how to become an IM, and it was all because of being in battle. But he improved based on what he had to do to beat certain players. He had certain things that he kept his own ideas. They weren't necessarily book ideas, but he had his own ideas, and they were prepared. They weren't just spur of the moment, exclaim kind of stuff. No, they were prepared. So he didn't go into battle with, naked.
Well,
So
it's fascinating in terms of, chess is an individual game, right? So in terms of the, and I grew up in wrestling and chess, so individual sports, but you got and wrestling probably even more team, definitely has the team aspect for sure, by default. Yeah, are you supported by a team or are you doing it all on your own? But naturally, chess is an individual mind sport. So there is that
yeah,
tendency, especially if you're kind of introverted.
but nowadays you can't. I mean, you have to be part of a corporation now if you're going to move up. So I mean, if the entire if an entire town, like for Magnus, the entire country was behind Magnus. Norway was behind Magnus.
That's national
And
pride right there. Yeah.
but they created things to take care of Magnus all along the way. So Magnus never had to worry about any support. The support was always there for Magnus. And same thing with all the Indian players as they go up. I mean, if they have a shot, they have some oil companies now that are putting them on the payroll to make sure that they are funded as they go along. They just have to wear it.
All the Tata companies and stuff, right?
Right. They just wear the shirt. Oh, okay, here's a check.
So now going back to what was it? Yeah, but in terms of again, final thing on Maurice Ashley.
Sure.
Yeah, he and Emery Tate, so fascinating. But in terms of his efforts to develop, black masters in the U.S. So yeah, I think it was some tournament he threw or something. But I know, but he cared about that, right? About development of black chess players. Yeah,
Well, not just
beyond
here.
just his own efforts.
Not just here. He's done it around the world. He's helped some African teams. He coached them during Olympiads and things like that. And he's got this thing now where I think the country of Jamaica has
Jamaica, yeah.
funded him to help create the first grandmaster from Jamaica.
And that's where he's from, right?
Right. So I
So
mean, Maurice is he's done tours around many colleges, and yeah, you'd be surprised how many places he goes.
yeah, very impressive guy.
Yeah,
Now,
yeah,
okay, so now going back to DC. Now the of course, this is for the King's File, resurgence of the King's File publication that
sure.
been going strong until the late '90s or mid to late '90s, and now
Yes.
Benny Johnson of the Black Knights, which is an institution. We can get into that. So the Black Knights team in DC, and this is his baby, bringing it back, and I'm helping out, and we have a few others who are helping out. We have Kinney and Newman, and and then and Benny doing the editing. So yeah, it's to go into that, and that's this podcast is connected to that, and so they're from the Black Knights. So there's kind of this connection between the Black Knights, DC Chess League, and this publication, which is great. And you've contributed to the publication, so we're going to have the hard copy version, or mostly online, like PDF. But I guess we'll have hard copy for those who want it, and the podcasts and so forth. So can you talk a little bit about the Black Knights history there? In terms of the development of black chess players in DC, and this is going back to segregation, if I recall.
Well, as far as that aspect goes, unfortunately, I didn't have, well, fortunately, I didn't have that experience, and unfortunately, I didn't talk to somebody like Ken Clayton or Frank Street, or the players that really had a lot of that happened to them during the play. They had a lot more challenges playing. Ken Clayton, there were really very few opportunities when he became a master.
Mhm.
Um, and I believe that he was on the cover of a Chess Life, but he really had to go through. There were no Ashleys or Tates or anything like that, around. I think there was a few players like Maurice Giles, I think in Chicago or something like that, and there was Streets, and there weren't too many strong players around. Although, again, there are players in the Detroit scene, the Chicago scene. I haven't been part of any of that, so I don't know.
Mhm.
I know that the guy that does a lot of streaming um, on chess.com.
Yeah, Canty, James
Yeah,
Canty.
he's from
Heard of
he's
it.
from
Yeah,
Detroit, and he's
yeah,
mentioned in the
yeah.
book as well. But he
Yeah, I saw
also
that. Yeah, I
he
met
he
him. Well, I played him once. Nice win by him.
he analyzed the game that Tate did, and he was talking about Tate, so he's somebody that's really gotten into the streaming and the
Yeah,
play, and he's very connected.
yeah.
So
I mean, he's from Detroit. Yeah, I went to school in Michigan, so I know. Spent some time in Detroit, so he's a big part of the coming out of Detroit, the chess scene there.
yeah,
Taking it. Yeah, I remember watching him a bit on Twitch when he was, getting up there, developing as a social media star.
yeah, yeah.
Pretty
I
pretty
mean,
strong.
there's players that have a lot of talent. Stephen Mohammed, he did well in the U.S. Championship, but I don't know what happened as far as his continuing to play after that. But he became an IM, and then there's William Morrison, who's in the area. He's a Baltimore guy, but of course we're talking about DC.
And you played for the Black Knights.
Pardon?
Did you play with the Black Knights?
Yeah, I actually played with the Black Knights. I was bored two. Emery was bored one, and
Nice.
for
How long were
for
you guys together on the team? Oh, go ahead. Sorry.
probably about a year. I mean, that was in '89, and that's that year was the year that I had my big win in the World Open, and I went out to California the one time I went out there. So that was a nice year, and I spent a lot of time with him that year. That was probably the most I spent of the time I spent with him.
And you think by working side by side, literally on the your team as well, do you
He
think
was a
that helped
different
you do
he
so
was
well?
he was a different kind of influence. The players that Stan, Sal, Vince, Richard Terry, they developed my overall foundation. Tate developed my sort of Stan was a very aggressive player, but Tate was more of a ferocious player. I mean,
Mm,
and
right.
he just had a ferocious way of going after. It's hard. There's attacking, and then there's attacking, and then there's attacking.
Yeah, yeah.
And I
Or the,
was,
yeah.
but in order to play against him or against Morrison or against Ashley, you have to really raise the level of attack. I mean, you could be a good attacker, but you have to go farther beyond. You have to raise your strengths to a level to go after them. Because if you don't, then they're just going to wipe you out. So you have to
Right,
show
right. Yeah.
you have to show them something with your play in order to get the impact. And then that's
See,
that challenge was what raised the bar for me to move forward.
that brings up an interesting aspect of chess skills when you're facing a great attacker. I mean, obviously you have to be a great defender. When you're reading Art of Attack and Chess, you learn how to be a great attacker, and in understanding strong attack, you understand strong defense. Now, there's a chapter on defense. You can read Art of Defense and Chess, which is important, right? But when you're facing someone so strong, do you, it's theorists, authors talk about don't be, you can't passive defense fails, right?
Right.
So, what do you think? Do you to to match a guy like that? Do you just have to attack hard too, or do you just go in? You have to be great, just pure defense, or is it like a mix? Get ready to counterattack, or what skills do you think you need to handle someone as ferocious as that?
Well, the funny thing about that is like, the few times that Emery had to defend, or find only moves, he found them. And
Uh,
that was one of the things that I realized from computers right away is like, when there was an only move, the computer found the only move. And it's like I tell my students, it's like if there's only one move to play, make sure you play it.
take your
But that's
time. Do
but
not,
but
do not
that's but
rush when
that's
you're on
but
defense
that,
like that.
but that's key because if you don't find only moves, you lose.
Right.
And the computers find them instantly, and that's one of the most the hardest things to deal with is like if there's only one defense, they'll find it, in a millisecond.
It
And
gives you a false sense of security too. You're like, oh, the engine says it's fine, and you got to keep finding these, navigate that minefield when you're under that attack. Well, attacker's advantage, right?
yeah, but the good thing about that is it makes you sharper, and you'll find when you start when my rating started to climb up. I'll never forget this. I was playing a player that I had, was like my level, or was actually like a couple hundred points ahead of me, and I had trouble with him. And then one day I looked at the position and I saw him 8-5. I just saw it, and it was like, and I realized, wait a minute, this is 8-5. And then I just started making the moves. He resigned on the third move of the fourth sequence, and it's like from that point on, my eyes saw things differently, and that was because of all the punishment. It's like the Fisher I just got good thing. It's like all the years of punishment and the beatings and everything. They finally took hold, and then all of a sudden, it was like I was giving the beatings instead of receiving them.
Yeah, that's the thing. When you lose, it doesn't matter. I mean, I tell my students, like a lot of times they end up doing pretty well in the first tournament, but I'm like, look, if you lose all 4 games or whatever in your first tournament, I mean, that's part of you're getting stronger. Forget about one tournament, that tournament, and you're going to feel better about it when you win too. So after a year of taking some beatings like that, that's all part of you winning when it matters in the future. And you're going to look back and say, wow, I put in that hard work. I took some beatings. I feel great. Right. It's
I,
all
I
about
have
that development.
I have a really hard time when a student loses and they start crying, or the parent says, "Oh, my child is crying because of this." It's like I say to myself, "Okay, maybe they're playing the wrong sport or the wrong game. Maybe you need something that's a little bit less." Because this is the Fisher's number three of the five things. It's like concentrate, think ahead, learn from your losses.
Well, including psychological. I mean, the way I take a slightly different view, which is that, if you can hang on there and keep going, especially for kids, that's psychological development. So if you get beaten up over the chessboard, you cry. Okay, if you can handle it and move on, all right. Well, maybe you're not going to cry in 2, 3, 4 times, right? You give it a few times and you get stronger. And that's like chess is like a safe laboratory for life, right? So you can handle that, and then in real life, maybe you can. Hopefully, you can, take roll with the punches in real life too, right?
I'll take your word for it.
I mean, just throw them out. You throw them out there with the sharks, right? Yeah, no,
Right.
I mean, it's brutal. It's brutal, but that's where you provide your support as a coach and as a parent, right?
Yes.
And if they can't, okay, fine, I get it. You give them a shot. If they can't handle it after a few times, they don't like it. All right, that's up to them. But I push them a little bit. Take on, deal with it a little bit if you want, and you'll get stronger. But anyway,
The
so
key
as for
thing, love for the game. That's where it's all about for
yeah,
me. Love this game.
exactly. Yeah, Fisher said that too, right? And yeah, if you love the game and you're willing to do it, but okay, maybe competition's not for you yet, but for those people, for those individuals, but yeah, if you love the game, that's the thing. You just gotta change your vantage point. Anyway, well, as for the King's File, given that this is connected to the King's File, and you had written for it a lot in the '90s, right? Or starting in
Mhm.
the '90s, or when can you speak on that a little bit? And
I
what is the
think,
significance? What is the significance of the King's File for you, and where it's going to go?
well, writing is something that if you can write about your craft, it means that your understanding has reached a point where you can pass it on to other people as well as the teaching aspect of it. I like putting my ideas into written form because I can share that with other people and they can sort of get into my head without being there with me. They can just open the book. And that's sort of the way I feel about books is that I can be at whatever time frame 1600s, 1800s, or, beginning of time, BC, what have you, just by opening a book.
Right.
And, that shared experience, I think some of the things that I've experienced, regardless of the nature of computers and all that, it's really good stuff to share. I think that it is of value. Yeah.
And so, and now, to what degree is the King's File DC specific? Sometimes you have these local publications, but you're speaking to kind of national issues or something like that.
I think it's
You'll be able
DMV specific, not just DC.
DMV, yeah, DC, Maryland, Virginia area.
Yeah, yeah.
Yeah. So, and by the way, just speaking of, since we're talking kind of like if you're speaking on acronyms and whatnot, just, for like in the DC area, alphabet soup agencies and stuff. So for people that don't know of the names, you mentioned Stan, that's Stan Fink, and you mentioned Sal Rosario, right? And Sal
Yes.
Rosario, he's actually contributing as well.
And Sal just became DC champion.
Oh, okay. I didn't know about that yet. Wow, congratulations.
And Adu is senior champion.
Oh, wow, and congrats to, and that's Oladapo Adu from Nigeria,
Yes.
international
Yes.
master, and Saul is national master, right?
Yes.
He's on the team with me. Well, we're both on the same team, which is kind of fun. It's called the Coral Kings because we're the Arlington Kings, and then the Coral Reef. The teams merged since there weren't that many people who wanted to play. What kind of dwindling numbers coming out of the pandemic. So anyhow, we both play on the same team as well as Saul. So now I'm kind of just I'm joining you guys. I'm joining a great tradition. I'm not just that team, but just the DC Chess League in general. And this, it's an honor to be able to join you guys, because you guys have been doing this for decades and just joined in the last few years. So it's fun. But yeah, so Saul has been on a tear. He helped the team finally win over the Argyles. They always win, right? So we finally won last season, the DC Chess League, and that's largely because of Saul. He either held critical positions or just mostly won.
We won a lot. We've taken turns winning the league. The Argyles have had it for a long time, but we won it a lot of years. I think we won it like 9 or 10 years in a row. Back
which team?
The Coral Reef.
Coral Reef, yeah, Coral Reef
we
is a very strong team. So combined is great.
Yeah, so the Argyles, those guys are tough. I don't do well against Jeff for whatever reason. Jeff McKenna.
Jeff McKenna and Andrew Samuelson. Yeah, and Samuelson, well, he's just very consistent. Like he'll show up he has like perfect attendance, right? He plays in all of them, so he's a good leader, great leader in DC Chess League in terms of his team or crushing other teams. But we always we were going to the tie breaks with them, or the final round, I guess tie breaks, yeah. And then they end up beating us. They're like, yeah, I got a draw against Samuelson, which was critical. If I'd won, we would have won, things like that, right? Or I think we would have tied or something like that. Yeah, I think we would have tied if I'd beaten him or something. But yeah, he's real tough, as well as Jeff McKenna. Yeah.
Well, these guys are part of the history of the area too. I mean, Jeff has been Virginia champion a bunch of times. So has Andrew, and it's helped. The folks like that have helped continue the fire of the league and over the years. And now there's going to be a bunch of young players coming along that'll take part of that as well.
Yeah, we'll see this the new generation steeped in engine analysis. We'll see, just like in general with their screen time as a baby, right? Growing up with a smartphone as a 6-month-old. The same thing with the DC. With the chess engines. Yeah. So in terms of the publication, so pretty much, and you're going to be bringing in some of your revamping some of your old articles to great, really fun articles. So can you tell me about a couple of the columns you've written and what you want to bring back? And by the way, I think next. So I think for maybe part 3, if you want, because then we talked about doing like a multi-part series because you have such a wealth of knowledge and insights to bring. So and then maybe we can pick up where we left off in terms of your chess development as you're moving toward master level, but also, and I think nothing says it better than your own games, right? So bringing a couple of your great games, like you mentioned in '89, right, when you're at your acme, it sounds like. So yeah, we can bring that in and say bring in whatever else other insights you want. We could do your game analysis too.
Yeah, 92, I hit 2,400. So that
Oh,
I won the
92. Okay.
Maryland Closed Championship. And so I've got, a few games. I also have a game that's that I found. So there's just a lot that we'll see together, and the readers will see, and there'll be even more stuff than that. So I have a lot more to offer everybody.
Awesome. Yeah, I think the blend, so that we have that modern blend, where Benny Johnson really wanted to bring back that classic publication, which I think is cool because I'm all about, like we've talked about last time with
I love
the
classics.
value of book, yeah, classics, learning from the classic masters, reading book, actually picking up a book, something as I said, in contrast to just growing up with a computer and engine analysis, or even if it's like this like Chessable and stuff. You don't quite get, again, I'm all about the narrative, and you kind of just have this disjointed knowledge, Um, so yeah, you got the publication, and then you've got the like podcasts such as this, and Alan Newman did a podcast with Malcolm Wooten, who just graduated from Howard University. He's an accountant now. And yeah,
Nice.
he was one of the presidents of Howard Chess. I think he's interviewing other presidents, if I recall. But definitely looking at HBCUs, which has been really blossoming, HBCU chess scene, Howard University, definitely at the Harvard, right? Uh,
Nice.
yeah, the Black Harvard, I think, of HBCUs. Yeah, so it's that'll be cool. Just kind of working in partnership with them. Great team. Yeah, so I think we'll just continue the blend of the podcasts, and so you'll provide more context and great things you have to say. So this is really awesome. So thanks so much, Greg, for Greg Achuano. Really appreciate all your insights, and I enjoyed our conversation. So looking forward to more.
Thank you. More to come.
Awesome. I'll let you go. I know it's afternoon. I know you're a busy guy. So we'll see you next time.
Okay. Take care.
You too. And